Okay, today's video is covering chapter 1-2, and it's very similar to yesterday, so these notes probably won't be as long as yesterday's, but we are going to be talking about translating word phrases into they're called algebraic expressions today instead of numeric expressions, but it still means that math sentence. So we're still going to be writing math sentences based on word sentences. The reason it's called algebraic expression today instead of numeric is because today we're going to be using variables because we're going to have some unknown numbers that we need to put a variable in place of. So just as a review, a variable is a letter that takes the place of an unknown number. So if we don't know a certain number, we can put a variable in its place, and it will represent that unknown number in our math sentence. So let's take a look at number 1. Again, what we need to refer back to is the box from yesterday that showed all of the kind of the keywords that represented different operations in math. So we'll look through our sentence here for number 1, 6 times a number minus 11. And the first thing we want to do is we want to look for those key phrases that mean operations. So first we're going to look right here. We've got times, and we know that that's times. You can use a dot or an X. And then we also have minus, right? And we know that minus is subtraction. And then what else we also have is we have the number 6, and we have the number 11. But then we also have this phrasing here, a number, right? A number. And we don't know what that number is, so we can't obviously write a number underneath it, but we need to represent it because it is part of the expression. So we're going to assign it a variable, and I'm just going to assign it an n, okay? So we've got 6 times some unknown number, so 6 times n minus 11. So we would write that. I'm going to write it kind of the crude way first, and then I'm going to clean it up and show you how I would like it in your final. So let's go ahead and let me get black up here, okay? The answer that we're looking for is 6, let me undo that, sorry, I'll write it up a little bit higher. 6 times some unknown number minus 11. Now this is technically right, but you always should clean up expressions to make sure that they are as neat as possible. And there is a cleaner way. 6 times n can actually be written 6n. So this would be your final expression. Now remember, all we're doing here is translating each phrase into an algebraic expression. We're not evaluating it, so we don't need to go any further than 6n minus 11, okay? So if we look at number 2, again, let's look for those operation words. So we have the product of, we know that that's multiplication. The product of what? Well, we've got 800. And then we also have that a number that we're going to use n to represent. So the product of means multiplying 800 times n. Now you can do this in 2 steps or you can do it in 1. I don't really care. You can start off by saying 800 times a number, right? That's the product of 800 and a number. Or you can just simply write 800n because that is the final expression that you need to have there, okay? Let's see here. Let's do, I think the other one we did in class was this number 4 here. So let's look and break it down here. We've got 5 times the sum of 3 and some number. So we've got times, right? We've got that number. That's one of our keywords that we had from that operations box yesterday. So we've also got the sum of, and we know that that is addition. And then we've got some numbers in here. We've got 5 and we've got 3, right? So what else do we have? We also have this sum number, right? That's our unknown number. That's our n. Now, when you first start out, you might think that this is, right, 5 times 3 plus n, because we know that it's the sum of 3 and some number, so 3 plus n is the sum of 3 and some number. Now, if you look at this the way it's written right now, PEMDAS order of operations would say that we would multiply 5 times 3 and then add the n. So that would be 5 times 3 plus some number, and that's not what this says. This wants you to take 5 times the whole sum of 3 plus a number. So we need to use parentheses here because we need to make sure that we're doing the sum of 3 and some number first and then taking 5 times that sum. So again, there's a cleaner way to write that, which is to alleviate the multiplication sign and just write it as, just write it as 5 parentheses 3 plus n, and that's actually the final way that you would write your answer. Okay, last but not least, we have number 5 here, half the distance to school. So it doesn't seem like we've got much here, but we do. So we've got half. Well, we know that half can be represented number-wise as either, right, 1/2 or 0.5. Okay, and for this instance, we're pretty much going to stay with 1/2, but just so you know that it can be. But I'm going to go ahead and erase that 0.5 because we're going to stick with the half. And then what's our unknown here? What's our number that's unknown? Well, it's this distance to school. We don't know what that distance to school is. So we need this right here, distance to school, and you can use nx. I'm going to use a d just because I try to make my variables kind of make sense with my equation or with my expression. So we've got 1/2 of the distance to school, or 1/2 the distance to school. And if you're not sure how to write this, think about what that means. So if you say that you are 6 miles from school, and I ask you what half of that is, you would tell me 3. And in your head, how did you get that? Well, you divided the distance to school, you divided it by 2, right? So you divide the distance by 2, and that gives you half the distance to school, okay? You could also write it 1/2 times the distance to school, or you could write it 0.5 times the distance to school. Those all mean the same thing. Okay, distance divided by 2, multiplying distance by half is the same as dividing it by 2, and then multiplying it times 0.5. But this one right here is probably the preferred way you should write it. Okay? All right, moving on to the bottom. Okay, this is a lot like yesterday. The only difference is that you have to plug in the values for x, y, and z instead of them being given to you. So we're going to color code this here. So we're going to make x's equal to 12. We need to remember that. Okay, x equal to 12. We've got our y's equal to 20. And we have our z equal to 4. So those 3 values we need to use to, right, evaluate. Remember, I said yesterday, evaluate kind of means solve or get down that triangle, start wide, get down, down, down to where you have a single value at the bottom. So let's start with number 6 here. So number 6 says x plus y plus z. And we know what x, y, and z are, so we need to write it out. So x is 12, right? Plus y is 20 plus z is 4. Okay, so we have now plugged in x, y, and z, the values for x, y, and z, and the directions say right here, evaluate, which means we're going to actually add everything up and get it down to one concise number. So when you do that, 12 plus 20 is 32. Okay, so that's 32. Plus 4, 32 plus 4 is 36, and so there's your final answer for number 6. Okay. The other example I did in class was number 15. That's the only 2 I worked in class on the board. So let's look at number 15. Okay. So we've got z right here. This is the one I'm doing right here. So we have z, which I know z is 4. Okay. And then in parentheses, y, which y is 20, y minus x, and we know that x, we got that right here, right? X equals 12. And then on top of that, keep going, we have plus 4. And now remember, when you have a right here, when you have a number right next to a variable, it can be rewritten. Whoops, let me redo that. It can be written as 4 times z. Okay, 4 times z. So we've got 4 times z. Whoops, nope, don't want to put z there, do I? I want to put what z actually equals, which we know that z actually equals, right here, 4. So if you read this expression right here, all right, this is the one we're doing. We've got z, which is 4, and then in the parentheses, 20 minus 12, which is y minus x, plus 4 times 4, because z equals 4. All right, so PEMDAS says we do what first? Let's look at our equation here. We've got right here. PEMDAS says we do parentheses first. So I'm just going to rewrite this 4 out here because I'm not messing with that yet. 20 minus 12 is 8. And then plus 4 times 4. Okay, I just rewrote that line after I did my parentheses, 20 minus 12. All right, now PEMDAS says we do multiplication. So I've got 4 times 8, which is 32, plus another multiplication, 4 times 4, which is 16. And then last but not least, we do addition. 32 plus 16 is 48. And so your final evaluation would be 48. And again, notice kind of that triangle. We start out wide and we go smaller, smaller, smaller as we work through PEMDAS in order, smaller, smaller, smaller until we get to that final evaluation. A couple of notes that I wanted to just go over really quickly. One is we talked about PEMDAS yesterday, and I told you that it's parentheses, exponents, and the multiplication division, and I told you they are on one level, and when you do those, you do them left to right, and then addition and subtraction are on one level, and you do those left to right. So just as a reminder, PEMDAS is, right, parentheses, exponents, and then multiplication and division are on the same level, which means if you have all multiplication and division to do, you do it left to right, okay? And then you do addition, subtraction are also on the same level. So if you have nothing but addition and subtraction, you do them left to right, okay? The other thing I want to cover is, I had a question in class and we didn't cover it, is one like this number 11. Y times z plus x. Remember that when you have a number and a variable next to each other, like right here, 4z is the same as 4 times z. Well, when you have two variables next to each other, like right here, yz is the same as y times z plus x. So you would have here, you would have 20 times 4 plus 12, and then PEMDAS would say you would do 20 times 4 first, which would be 80, plus 12, which would equal 92, okay? So when you have two variables touching, it means multiplication. When you have a number and a variable touching, it means multiplication. And then when you have a number right outside of a parentheses, like here, it means multiplication, right? So you just need to remember that there's a lot of times where it's multiplication, but it doesn't actually say multiplication. Okay? All right, that is it for today. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Otherwise, scroll to the very bottom of the assignment in Canvas and hit load, and it will bring up the worksheet in Kami. Okay, let me know if you have any questions.